the sermon and spiritual food we were fed and the physical food we had this afternoon. And now, as we're entering the evening program, we ask you to speak through Dr. King to us. May we hear, may we be blessed, and may we be better off when we leave here. In Christ's name, amen.
Testing, testing. Yes. Test. Thank you, Sir Sam. Well, thanks for coming back this afternoon. It's good to see you, and we're about to get started with our final segment for the day. I'm just wondering, are there any questions from this morning? Any questions at all? Need for clarification, suggestion, comment? Yes, Joan.
Yeah. Um, One of the questions I have is, um, does addiction to alcohol or drugs or anything, um, does it, how should I phrase this? Does it make people more angry?
Okay, okay.
Or the behaviors that they manifest, does it really cause them to be angry,
To
and does
be
it bring on more mental
exacerbate
health?
kind of
Yeah,
exacerbate issues.
just
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Very good question. So that's a double-edged sword, right? Um, let's look at the Joan. So let's look at the classes of drugs, right? So for instance, we have benzodiazepines, right? And alcohol is in that same class, right? So people who are typically anxious, right? They will abuse benzos. And the reason why they will abuse benzos is to calm the brain down, because the brain is in a state of anxiety, right? And so I can almost predict someone comes in, tell me the drug, and I will tell you the disorder. Because if it's anxiety, you're stuck on low, right? Um, the person needs something to kind of soothe the brain. So they will abuse something like alcohol, right, or benzodiazepine, right? So the question you're asking, well, does the drug make it worse? So does alcohol make the condition worse, right? But in the moment, it makes it better, right? Because it's a central nervous depressant. And so all of the anxiety that you're feeling and so on, all of that stuff, ooh, it mellows you out. So that's what the drug does. And that's why people like it, because it's habit forming. Now, once that effect wears off, then now you're back to square one, or this time you're back to minus square one. So now to get up to square one, you got to take it again. And this time, it doesn't have such a great effect on you, because you're chasing that high that you felt the first time around. And to get that same high, now you got to take more to get to square one, right? And the effect now could be shorter. So you're constantly chasing your tail to get to square one. So does it make the condition worse? I think so. I think it makes it 10 times worse, or a million times worse, right? And then for someone who is suffering low moods, low level, like depression, right? Or someone who has attention deficit disorder, you can't focus. Adults have this condition also, right? So you need something to kind of fix it. So people self medicate, like with stimulants, right? Like with Adderall or Concerta or crack, because crack is a stimulant. You get a really nice high, but it only lasts a few seconds. So now you got to chase it again to get to that. And now you need more and more and more and more to get right there. So, of course, it makes your condition worse. Yes.
I got a question. When I was a little boy, not a little boy, but my young teens,
Yeah.
my dad was older gentleman, right?
Yes.
And he depended, I don't say dependent, but he has to take medications. And I was telling myself, man, poor guy, he lives on pills,
Yes.
you know, but here now I'm at that age and I'm taking medications. I'm thinking, and I
Yeah.
say, you know, I don't want to live on pills, but
No.
yet doctor says you gotta take this. So my dilemma is, you know, at what point can we put the doctors and then where did God come in? 'Cause
Okay.
That's where you don't want to depend on God, you know, but then no, you got to depend on doctors because they're helping you. They teach you all these things.
Okay.
How do you
So
battle that?
yeah. So let me say this right. There's a reason why God is God, and there's a reason why we are humans, right? So we live in a world of sin, right? We live in a world. This is not what God intended for us. Remember, God said to Adam and Eve, "The day you disobey me, you are going to die." Right? That's what we've been studying in our lesson also. The day you disobey me, you are going to die. But man says, so what? I'm going to try it anyway. So because of sin, Carlos, because of sin, we have these issues. Because of sin, we have brain injuries, right? Because of sin, we have diabetes. Because of sin, we have cancers. Because of sin, we have all of these ailments until Jesus comes. So, to answer your question, if you have a condition like ADHD, this is where you can't focus. You cannot focus. You got two choices. Choice number one, you can pray and pray and pray and attend prayer meeting and Sabbath school and return your tithe and do everything that a good Christian does, but your attention deficit disorder is still going to be there. You can refuse to take the medication, but the condition is still going to be there. So that's choice one. Choice two is you can do exactly the same thing that you did before, pray, da, and take the medications, and your condition will improve. Which one of those two choices you want to make? One or two? You want improvement. So that's why you will choose choice number two. You're still a Christian, you're still a good Christian, will choose choice number two. So, I wish there were a better answer. Let's say, like, if you have sustained a brain injury, car accident, near drowning, a blow to the head, whatever it is, and your prefrontal cortex does not work well. If it doesn't work well, it doesn't work well, and you have to have treatment.
You know, and to that, I think I want to add um, to younger folks. You know, sometimes we have no time, so we do what we want to do,
Mm-hmm.
or we do what we think we need to do.
Sure.
In my case, you know, as a truck driver, I had to make quick stops, and I would eat a hamburger. You know, I would get something quick, get a donut, get a breakfast chat. You know, so we need to watch what we put in our bodies. And we think it's so easy, you know, with quick fix, and quick fix don't work.
Yeah, you said it. You said it, brother. You said it. Thank you. You said it. So let's get to our presentation. The reason why I want to do this presentation is for a couple of reasons. One is that this is an issue that is now entered our churches, and we have to deal with it. Um, a number of our younger people and our older people also, right, have been facing issues of substances. And I wanted to focus specifically on cannabis. I wanted to focus specifically on that because there's some new information coming out that I think will be helpful to all of us. And so even though some of us here uh, may not struggle with this issue, others will. And it will be good if we can share this information. to others. So that's why I wanted to do this presentation. And feel free to stop me at any time and ask questions also. And by the way, the position I am taking is I'm not doing this presentation as a minister. I'm not doing this presentation as a Seventh-day Adventist. I'm simply providing you information. That's all I'm doing. I'm not taking any side. I'm just providing you the information. And how you want to deal with that information is up to you. There is no judgment on my part in terms of good or bad. I'm just, as a professional, providing information to you. I just wanted to make that very, very clear. So let me turn this on. And hopefully, here we go. So cannabis, let's talk weed for pain, for pleasure, for better, or for worse. So there's some new research coming out, and also there's some new legislation coming out also that I just want to prepare us for. So for instance, those are the different states. And the last time I checked, which was last week, there are only 3 states that have no public policy on the use of cannabis as a drug. And you can see those 3 states in white. I looked at Texas, and it still is illegal to use cannabis in Texas. Is that correct? But you still have a policy, which is that doctors, on some occasions, can prescribe. And doctors have specific guidelines, like when they're prescribing, the substance must have less than 1% of THC. So you still have public policy on cannabis. In all of the other, well, except 3, for medicinal purposes as well as for recreational purposes, it is allowable. More and more and more and more. All right. For instance, in my beautiful state of Michigan, right, we have 410 medical marijuana dispensaries. That's a lot. That is a lot. And last year alone, in terms of sales, $1.3 billion in cannabis sale in Michigan last year alone. I had a look at that information again, and I had a look again. $1.3 billion. When my son was home, several years ago, he said to me, "Hey, Dad, you know what? We should open a marijuana dispensary." That's what he said to me. Hey, Sam, can you do me a favor? Can you close that door for me? I'm really struggling with people just coming and going. It's really distracting. Thank you. Thanks, I appreciate it. Yeah, that's what, and I said, no, we don't do. He said, yeah, and then he came back a couple of months ago, and when we were talking about cannabis, he said, you see, you should have listened to me, right? We would have been rich. So those numbers represent the cannabis business, right? And so what's going to happen now is what's already happening is that people with money are getting into that business. And what they're doing now, they're now promoting the use of cannabis. In the church, out of the church, Coca-Cola is coming up, if they haven't as yet, coming out with one of the drinks that has cannabis. Yes. Yeah, yes. So I'm just preparing us for what's going to happen. So this is an onslaught that is going to hit all of us. Young people, older people in the church, whatever. So we better be prepared as I present this information, and so that you can educate yourself and the others around you, right? So this is in Texas, right? Only a physician can prescribe for now, but I was looking at your new, I think a couple of weeks ago, legislators now are in favor of legalizing it in the state of Texas. And they did a survey, and 63% of the population said this is a good thing. So you guys really want weed. I didn't make that stuff up. That's what's happening right now, right? And and these are the different forms, right? You know, there's wax, there's dabs, there's different forms of the substance. The problem, like with some of them, like with the cannabis cookies and brownies, is that they're not designed for children, right? And so if children get their hands on them, it could be potentially fatal. That is one of the big issues with cannabis. Um, I just want to mention that. So, Mr. Wallace, if you have this stuff at home, please protect it very carefully. I'm not suggesting that you use cannabis, by the way. I'm just saying protect it. So, and I'm going to provide some clarification. So, and by the way, now the term that is used, because more and more rich folk are getting into the business, they no longer are calling it marijuana. The politically correct term now is cannabis. Yes, it's cannabis. Right? So because now more people, it has become mainstream, right? So scientists are focusing their attention more and more on the plant. And for some, and they're estimating that there's between 80 to 500 different strains in the cannabis plant. 80 to 500 different strains in that plant. Isn't that something? And they've identified over 100 different cannabinoids. They've identified that. And this is what their researchers are seeing more and more. Now, there are two important cannabinoids that I will talk about briefly. The first one is THC, and the second one is CBD. So these are two cannabinoids that are found in the plant, right? THC and CBD. For years and years and years, you know, when people were saying that that weed will make you crazy and weed will make you psychotic and so on and so forth, they were mostly talking about this one here, THC, not this one, CBD. So what's happening now, for better or for worse, scientists are growing and manufacturing this one here, the one that is high in CBD and low in THC. So this is the one that manufacturers and scientists and so on are producing more and more. The ones that are high in CBD and low in THC. That is very important because more and more as they experiment and do that, this is going to become more popular. This is going to start to show up in food. This is going to start to show up in drinks. This is already showing up in a lot of medications. It's already showing up in a lot of medications. So keep this information in mind. THC and CBD. Just see if you can keep that in mind, right? THC and CBD, right? So, right. So there are two species of cannabis that are really popular, right? Cannabis sativa and cannabis indica. It's important. It's very important. These guys are like two twins, sativa and indica. Sativa is the one that is high in THC. Indica is the one that is high in CBD. It's very significant. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. So, sativa, high in THC, it lifts moods, improves cognition and executive functioning. And indica, this is the one that researchers are saying improves sleep, relaxes muscle, relieves pain, and manages anxiety. Those are two strains in the plant. Now, For better or for worse, here's some information that you need to know also. In our bodies, in our system, this is how we have been designed. And this is one of the questions I hope to ask God when I see him. All of us have this endocannabinoid system in our bodies. It's already in our bodies, from the top of our head to the sole of our feet. We have a system in us that is called the ECS, the endocannabinoid system. Like it or not, you don't get to choose. You have this system in you. This is how we were designed. Remember I talked about the THC and the CBD? So the CBD, this is one of the receptors in our system, right? So the CBD1 attracts the THC, and the CBD2 attracts the CBD. Why is this important? Let me show you why. In our brain has a lot of receptors. And our brain has, unfortunately, a lot of CB1 receptors. And the CB1 receptors, like the THC, which is the psychoactive part of cannabis, which is the part that can stimulate psychosis. And so I like to show this to young people, is that in your brain, in this brain, if this is a model, there's already a lot of receptors just waiting for CB1 for THC. A lot of receptors. Because as you know, our brain also has pain receptors, right? Which is why when you take a Tylenol or an Aleve, the pain goes away, right? Or Motrin or something, because your brain already has receptors. You don't get to choose. This is how your brain is designed, so that when you're in a lot of pain and you take something, it blocks it. That's how your brain works. Well, the same brain also has CB1 receptors. And the CB1 receptors likes THC. That is found in a cannabis. It's just what it is. So now you begin to understand why someone who is smoking weed that may be high in THC, why it's so hard for them to stop. It's very difficult for them to stop because their brain, you see all of these spots here? All of these are receptors just waiting for that THC. These receptors are just sitting there waiting. The same principle applies for someone who smokes crack, or someone who drinks alcohol, or someone who takes, who is hooked on prescription medication. Our brain has receptors. And so I usually say to our people, are you sure that this is what you want to do? Are you sure? Especially my young friends, because if you tell them, don't do this, don't smoke weed, don't drink, don't do that, they want to know why. Why shouldn't I? Well, let me give you the information. Your brain has these receptors. Once you start, you are likely to be unable to stop. Is this what you really want to do to yourself? Those are the choices I give them, right? So, here's some research. They did a 42-year longitudinal study. And what that means is that they followed teenagers from an early age until they were about 42 years old. They kind of follow them. And these are people who used cannabis or substances. And what the researchers saw, see here, there's an 8 to 10 point decrease in intelligence after so many years. There's a drop in their intelligence. And this is just what the researchers saw after following those users for so many years. Cognitive decline. When they stop using, there seemed to be an increase or a rebound in cognitive improvement. This is what the researchers saw after doing this study. Okay? Cannabis and mental health, right? What are the effects on mood, anxiety, depression, mental health issues? It depends on which one of those two strains, right? Sativa or indica. It depends. What they saw with sativa is that if you already anxious or depressed or you have a disease like schizophrenia, it can actually make it worse. That's what the researchers saw. And by the way, this presentation, again, I'm happy to email it to you. And there is a link with tons and tons of references, so you can check that information yourself. So I'm not here to make up information. I'm just giving you information. Long-term risk. What the researchers saw is that individuals who began smoking before age 25, right? So before age 25, they're at a higher rate for developing a psychotic illness, especially if they have like family trauma and family issues and so on and so forth. This is long-term use. If you start before age 25, and there's also a decrease in cognitive performance. These are some of the things that the researchers saw. Okay. Now, how about cannabis and brain injury? And I have an interest in this because I work with brain injured patients, and I want to know what are the effects. Because let me tell you what I've been seeing is that some brain injured clients, and let me be very careful as I say this because I want you to hear me correctly. Some brain injured clients, when they use cannabis, it tends to regulate their mood. So what the researchers did, they look at mice studies with mice to see how do brain injured patients function when they use their substances. And they notice a decrease in pain, decrease in anxiety, decrease in aggression, and decrease in depression. This is with mice study, not with humans. I just want to make that very, very clear. Okay? They also did a 3-month longitudinal study, and they look at pain and psychiatric conditions, and they noticed like improvement in executive functioning and so on and so forth with brain injured patients. These are some of the things that they noticed. And what other researchers saw is that with some strains of cannabis, it can have a negative effect on brain functioning. So we have researchers saying, this is what we saw, and we have others saying, this is what we saw. So I just want to point that out in a very objective way, all right? And so they're still doing a lot of research to kind of figure out what are the effects. What are the effects on anxiety? What are the effects on depression? What are the effects? And by the way, I don't know if you know this, but the military has approved cannabis for PTSD. Military has approved that. You know, as I mentioned to you, it's coming. It's going to hit us like a ton of bricks. All right? Cannabis and pain. They're experimenting now. Yes, there is a question.
I just want to caveat what you said about military.
Yes.
A lot of people, I used to be in the military. When you're in the military, you can get all kinds of things because they study you
Mm-hmm.
and find out the effects.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't mean it's all good or all bad.
Absolutely.
That happens.
And you notice with my presentation, I'm not talking good or bad, right? I'm just giving you information in terms of what's going on around you so that we're all aware in terms of what's happening and what's coming, right? Cannabis and pain. You know, for some of us who are in pain and we are on some type of an opioid, right? Medications either for arthritis in our joints, right? Or I don't know what type of pain we may have, but it's prescribed frequently in the hospital. If you're having a root canal done, right? I don't think you want to have a root canal without any type of medication, right? Or if you're having surgery, you know, if they're going to cut you open, I don't think you want anyone to cut you open without any medications. It's just not going to happen. You're going to be in too much pain, right? So they prescribe opioid. So what the researchers are looking now at is, can we use cannabis as a substitute for opioids? That's what they're looking at now. Yes. Yes. Yes.
And so on top of the narcotics,
Yes.
sometimes it becomes very, very, I would say, dangerous
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes these patients, because it's rehab and you need for them to go back into the community with to be normal functioning.
Yes.
And sometimes they have issue getting off of it.
Correct.
And it becomes a big, big problem because, put it this way, they become addicted.
Okay, so this is what the researchers are saying, and this is what they're looking at, right? You spoke about Marinol, right? Let me do a quick run back because this is important. Let me see if I can get there. Okay. So Marinol comes over here from this class, right? Indica. So think about a couch, indica. They're making it less addictive and less habit forming. So they're going to get to a stage whereby it's not addictive and it's not habit forming. This one over here is habit forming. This one over here is not habit forming. So one of the issues we will have to confront is, what's going on? Why are we being prescribed this stuff? And you will be in a position to have to make your own decision. Let me just go back to where I was and done in okay, seizures, right? When you got a chance and you go home sometime tonight or whenever, look at the case of Charlotte. Charlotte was having up to 300 seizures a day. 300 seizures a day. And after giving her high levels of CBD, seizures went down to a couple times a month. Yes.
I want to add to that. You're talking about marijuana, but I had a friend who used to come to work. He wouldn't take marijuana or drugs, but he did rely on the power drinks.
Mm-hmm.
And he would buy, there's 2 cans, whatever,
Yep.
of the power drink and come to work, and he's wide awake.
Oh, those are just as dangerous.
And yeah, he had a seizure one day before he went down.
Correct.
So it's not just marijuana, but it's all this
Correct.
stuff that the government said it's okay to do.
Correct.
And we think it's okay, but it's not okay.
I'm just giving you the information. Yeah, so for a seizure, scientists are seeing that there is tremendous improvement after the administration of CBD, right, in patients who've had seizures. They did a recent study on inflammation, right? And this one, see what page, what slide, this, let me go back here. They looked at some research. They looked at 1,800 patients who had COVID. And this one just blew my mind away. They looked at 1,800 patients who had COVID. 64 of them were regular cannabis users. 64 of them. What they found is that those who were cannabis users, this is going to blow your mind. They had a shorter battle with COVID-19. Most people, the effects were severe, up to 6 days. Those who were on cannabis, their effects were severe, only up to 4 days. And they were less likely to go on a ventilator. They were less likely to go on a ventilator. And then the researchers said, whoa, what's going on? They realized that what cannabis does also, it reduces inflammation on the brain. But again, this is CBD. This is not THC. I wanna make that point. This is CBD. It reduces inflammation, not THC. Again, I am giving you information, right? And I'm going to keep saying, whatever you do with that information is up to you. I just want to be able to provide you so that when you talk to your young people, you know how to talk to them. Because our young people, they are not stupid, right? They're on social media. They're getting this information. So when you come to them with your explanation, they fact check you. And they say, how about this research here, Dad? Now, what do you have to say? And then you go, let me get back with you, right? So I'm giving you information because they're going to fact check you. They are going to fact check you. So the research is saying that it's good for seizures. So why can't I use it if I feel like I'm having a seizure? They ain't having no seizure, but it's just the kind of stuff that they will bring it to you, right? So yeah, I know the information, know the stuff, so that when they come with these questions, you have intelligent answers. Before, growing up in my country, our parents, we had to listen to them because we had no place to live, right? If you play the fool, seriously, if you play the fool, you ain't sleeping in that house, right? You are not sleeping in this house. Blah, 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 blah. But guess what now? Our young folk, they can work at McDonald's and get $18 an hour. They don't need you. So what are you going to do? Right? Get the information so that you can have a discussion with your children or other young people in the church. Any questions so far? You guys are very quiet. Some of you are sleeping. Wake up, wake up, wake up. Mr. Reed, what question do you have? You have questions. Yeah, his wife is going to ask the question for him. Yes. So Sister Reed says she's anxious.
You're telling us this. So what is it important to our Christian life?
Correct.
That's
So
the question.
correct. So here's why this is so important, right? If we keep doing what we're doing, if we keep Adventism amongst ourselves, we're going to be a nice small group, right? Totally insulated from what's going on outside. But how are you going to witness, right? How are you going to witness? And most importantly, what are you going to do when you invite people into the church? And when you can smell weed on their clothes, what are you going to do? How are you going to respond? And if you can smell weed on my clothes, and I can sing and I can play the piano, or I want to be the elder in the church, what are you going to do? How are you going to treat me? So that's why this is important for Christianity. We have a fixed position, right? We know what is right, we know what is wrong, and this is how we function. But we have to have answers to our young people. We have to be able to say, son, this is what the researchers are saying. Not all of them are Christians, right? Some of the information can be factual, and some of the information may not be factual. Let us review this stuff together. It's very important. And also, Sister Reed, and here's why this is so important. As Adventists, we really don't have a good response and a good relationship with people who use substances. We don't know how to relate to them. We are very awkward and uncomfortable, right? We don't have very good strategy. We don't even have support groups in our churches, right? Right? So how are you going to minister? When you go to prison, When you go to do prison ministry, right? What do you think is happening in their prisons? What do you think people are doing? They're using substances. So how are you going to talk to them? Before I take you, there's a hand. Oh, ask your question, and then I'm going to go way to the back, please.
You know, it's not a question, but it's a statement. We as parents, and me as a grandparent, we need to get involved with our kids.
Absolutely.
You know, because the government wants to get involved with your kids.
Not just the government, but social media.
Social media.
They're getting the information from social media. So they might as well get it from the church,
Yes.
right? Amen,
Because-
amen, and amen.
Yeah, because, you know, the kids are going to listen to somebody.
Absolutely.
And so right now, as a grandparent, I'm trying to get involved with my grandkids because they're the children and they're going to get fed a lot of this stuff you're saying. So we need to get in touch and talk to our kids and our grandkids.
So that's why it's important. Good question for Christianity. There's the lady to the back. Yes,
Hi, I have a question.
yes.
At what point is someone considered a weed head? Is it after the first try, the second try? Because I tried to tell somebody they're a weed head and they
Okay,
want to argue me down.
okay. So did you guys hear the question? Did you guys hear their question? At what point? Let me go back to this slide. Let me go back to this slide here. I hate to be going back and forth, but I want to, okay. So you see this slide on the screen, right? Remember I said that in our brain we have receptors, right? Every one of us is different from the other person. So for me, for Colin King, I may have a lot of receptors at the back here, but not a whole lot in front here. So for Colin King, I may be able to take a hit, a spliff, or whatever it is, and I can go about my daily activity because I don't have a whole lot of receptors here. But for Mr. Wallace, who is sitting in front of you, maybe he has a whole lot of receptors right in front here, and maybe his uncle was a weed head, and maybe his father was a weed head, and maybe his great-grandfather, and certain things run in generations, right? So it's hard for me to say who is and who isn't because everyone is different. But what I do know is that if you have this thing in your family, you are more likely to become a weed head. So for instance, schizophrenia. If you have a twin and one of them has a disease of schizophrenia, the other one is 50% more likely to have that same disease. So there's so many variables in there. I saw a hand to the back. Yes.
So just a question for my own clarification.
Sure.
Because you were talking about the receptors, and I just want to make sure what I heard. You said that the receptors are more susceptible to the THC. Is that what you said?
Okay, so we have CB1 receptors
Uh-huh.
that are susceptible to THC, and then we have CB2 receptors that are susceptible to CBD.
Would it be possible then that, God made us and He made everything perfect? Would it be possible that those receptors were probably made for some other type of stimulation that is good for us and not the bad one?
So the Bible says, and the plants were for the healing of the nations, right? So as you know, after sin, heaven, we're not going to be eating meat and so on and so forth, right? And God designed plants for our longevity. We are the ones who have chosen to abuse, right? I don't know that this stuff was even made to be consumed. I don't know that. But however, we have made it a part of our consumption. This is what we have chosen to do. And as we choose to do that, then we live with the consequences. It's just like alcohol, right? Alcohol, you know what is the main ingredient in alcohol? Ethanol. You know what's the main ingredient in gasoline? Ethanol. But we drink this stuff. I'm thinking, dude, you're drinking poison. So those are the things that we do to ourselves. And then some of us turn around and say, well, God made weed, so why can't I smoke it? He made the weed. Did he make? Yes.
I just think that, we always have to have present that we're not here just humans. We are fighting with principalities.
Absolutely.
And all these things, they can make them more delicious, more
Correct.
more appealing,
Mm-hmm.
and if we're not on our toes, that's where we fall into this kind of abuse. And some people, unfortunately, come from a family who probably were abusers, and this is where they go, and et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely. And this is why I think this is important, because we need this information. And as you get this information, and because people as not young people are very smart, and some of their responses is hard to kind of respond to. And so you need to arm yourself and educate yourself so you can let them know. Cannabis and neuropathy. So the scientists right now are experimenting with cannabis and pain neuropathy, right? And they're seeing medical improvement in those patients also. So pretty soon, it's also going to become mainstream based on the results that they're seeing. Cannabis and cancer, right? Look at that research on your screen. These are clinical trials. So now they're doing clinical trials with actual patients. So they looked at 17 patients who were on medical cannabis and 17 patients who were not on cannabis. The 17 patients who were on cannabis, they had more fatigue, more pain, more insomnia. Those were the ones who were on cannabis. However, they noticed that there was no cognitive impact. Cognitively, it did not make a difference cognitively.
When I think about what you said, I think about how when you hear drugs advertised on the TV, and it
Mm-hmm.
says this is good for your cholesterol,
Oh,
but watch
yeah.
out, it will give you diarrhea, it will give you
Oh,
this,
yes.
That's what I think about, because it might be good. Okay,
It might be good for one thing,
but
but
then you're gonna
all
get, yeah.
all of these other things exactly, and that is exactly what they're seeing. So I'm glad you made that point. So if your son or grandson or nephew or whomever comes home and he says, "Oh yeah, this stuff is good for my cognition, so therefore I should use it." Now you have the information to say, however, these are some of the side effects of the same thing that you're talking about. Yes, Don.
Just to add what you just said, Marinol. They
Yes.
use some patients who have poor appetite,
Yep.
malnourished.
Yep.
They used to improve it for the appetite.
Cancer patients
The
also.
cancer patient for
Correct.
the nausea and the vomiting
Yep.
and the diarrhea.
Mm-hmm.
So it does has good effect.
Correct.
But when I was growing up, and if I had smoked weed or whatever it is,
Sister Reed, you smoke weed? If. Brother Reed was quick to correct that. She said if.
I would look as a bad person.
Yes.
So in my head, even as a nurse, giving patient Marinol, I have like a bias in giving Marinol because I know it comes from marijuana and marijuana is bad. So I think I'm appreciative of you presenting it in such a light that I can look at it in a different way rather than have that stigma that it's marijuana is bad totally.
So do you guys catch what she just said? So she's in the medical profession, right? And her doctor prescribes Marinol to patients who may be in pain or cancer patients. And what she's saying, I'm glad she said it, is that they're seeing improvement in terms of nausea, in terms of headache, in terms of managing diarrhea, right? That is what the substance does. So what Sister Reed just said, growing up, she was all, and I was taught the same thing too, that this whole stuff is bad. So guess what's going to happen now? You're a young person now. Here's what you said, or it's on social media, right? Or it's right on the internet, or you can just Google it, and it will show you what is Marinol, what is it used for, how does it help cancer patients, and the information is right there. It does help cancer patients, but again, Marinol comes from CBD, right? THC is the psychoactive one. And they're growing a lot of plants now that is high in CBD, in the one that's good for you. That's what they're doing. So you have to be ready with this information to talk with your young people. Yes.
You know, what a comment. I grew up eating meat,
Uh-huh.
you know, and all that stuff. But my doctor said, if you want to live, you need to quit eating meat.
Mm-hmm.
The moment I'm thinking, I can't live on greens and stuff like that. I want to be starving. But you know,
You made the adjustment.
God, yes, yeah, just God will give you the ability to stop where it's not good for you. We
Absolutely.
need to put our faith and trust in God because He'll fill you up.
He absolutely
Today,
will.
That's all I eat today is, you know, leafy greens and vegetables and nuts, and I'm satisfied.
And you're still here today.
And I'm still good.
Thank you. Thank you. Look at that research on the screen. Again, I'm giving you information. They looked at 1,800 COVID patients, right? 6 to 9 this time. 6 to 9 of them were active users. And you notice shorter hospital stays, lower ICD admission rates, and less need for a ventilator. That is the research. So what are you going to say to a young person? How are you going to answer them when they pull out this research and say, now, Dad, what do you have to say about that? How are you going to answer them? Yes.
Do they have also a study that shows what the COVID disease has in it and how it interacts
Yes,
with this?
they do. They do. And I can answer that question. Yes, I can, because what it is that COVID is an inflammatory disease, right? And cannabis, CBD, is an anti-inflammatory. So that's why the COVID patients did better, because they were using an anti-inflammatory, right?
And I understand both of those factors.
Yes.
But you have to also look at neither one
Uh-huh.
is meant to be in our body.
Absolutely. Listen.
So when you take it from that angle,
Yes.
they may have, when you take it from that angle where neither was meant to be in our bodies, then you have two chemicals that are quote foreign to our body.
That are
interacting
absolutely
with each
foreign.
other that play a role in how you actually come out.
Absolutely. And again, here's the takeaway. Here's what I want you to take away from this place today. This is what I want you to take away. I don't want you to go and say, Colin King said, this stuff is good for you. I'm taking great pains for you to not say that. I want you to go and say, we looked at some research and he gave some information, but he also gave some warnings, right? Here are the warnings. Let me be very clear. Here are the warnings. 10 people can walk into a bar. I said that the last time, right? And 10 of them can pick up a joint and smoke it, right? And of that 10, maybe 2 or 3 of them are not going to be able to stop because of the receptors in their brain. So my position is, why start it in the first case when you have no idea what's going to happen to you? You have no idea at all. So that's my position. However, I want to be able to present objective information, right? So those are the COVID patients. Now, Don, I want to go back to a question that you just asked. So how does this matter in terms of Christianity, right? We have to be less judgmental. People struggle with all kinds of stuff. And because I don't struggle with something, doesn't mean that you are not going to struggle with it. And so I am hoping that one of our takeaways can be, we need to develop a little bit of empathy. It's like Jesus. It's like today, when Jesus went to Zacchaeus' house, that was a bad move. That was like the nail on his coffin. Because the Jews who were there said, are you kidding me? Are you going to a place where you know is a very bad place and you're going to go and associate with this rascal? Are you kidding me? And to some extent, as church folk, that's how we relate to people who struggle with substances. I want to play a video now. It's not made for Adventists, okay? This is my disclaimer. It's not made for Adventists, but it talks about empathy. And maybe it gives us a sense as to how we can relate to people, Don, to answer your question. Are you able to run that for me?
So, what is empathy and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection.
Let's try that again.
So, what is empathy and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, climb down. I know what it's like down here and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to share that with us because as we reach out to people, as we identify with people, we're going to have to demonstrate more empathy. Listen, people don't leave the church because they no longer believe in our doctrines. People leave the church because they don't feel connected. When people slip and fall and we come at them in a judgmental manner, why would they come back? Like, why in the world would they come back? So this is one of the tools that we need to have with us. The second and last tool, and this one is huge, right? Because I grew up in a culture where my parents and the elders, they use a lot of shame and blame. You ever heard this expression is good for you? You deserve it? Shame and blame. And as we evangelize, as we work with people, we have to watch to see, are we shaming people? If someone is a drug addict or a weed head, is it okay to shame them? if someone is having an affair with someone that gets really bad, is it okay to shame them? If someone steals money from the church, take what action you need to take. But is it okay to shame them? I want us to look at this one on blame. And this is the final one, and then I'll take your questions. Hang on to that question. I will take it. Can we get the one on blame? Thank you.
How many of you are blamers? How many of you, when something goes wrong, the first thing you want to know is whose fault it is? Hi, my name is Brene. I'm a blamer. Let me just tell you this quick story. So this is a couple years ago when I first realized the magnitude to which I blame. I'm in my house. I have on white slacks and a pink sweater set, and I'm drinking a cup of coffee in my kitchen. It's a full cup of coffee. I drop it on the tile floor. It goes into a million pieces, splashes up all over me. And the first, a millisecond after it hit the floor, right out of my mouth is this: damn you, Steve. Who's my husband? Because let me tell you how fast this works for me. So Steve plays water polo with a group of friends. And the night before, he went to go play water polo. And I said, hey, make sure you come back at 10, because I can never fall asleep until you're home. And he got back like at 10:30. And so I went to bed a little bit later than I thought. Ergo, my second cup of coffee that I probably would not be having had he come home when we discussed. Therefore, and so the rest of that story is I'm cleaning up the kitchen. Steve calls, caller ID. I'm like, hey. He's like, hey, what's going on, babe? What's going on? So I'll tell you exactly what's going on. I'm cleaning up the coffee that spilled all like dial tone. Because he knows. How many of you go to that place when something bad happens, the first thing you want to know is whose fault is it? I'd rather it be my fault than no one's fault. Because why? Why? Because it gives us some semblance of control. But here, if you enjoy blaming, this is where you should stick your fingers in your ear and do the na thing, because I'm getting ready to ruin it for you. Because here's what we know from the research. Blame is simply the discharging of discomfort and pain. It has an inverse relationship with accountability. Accountability, by definition, is a vulnerable process. It means me calling you and saying, hey, my feelings were really hurt about this, and talking. It's not blaming. Blaming is simply a way that we discharge anger. People who blame a lot seldom have the tenacity and grit to actually hold people accountable, because we expend all of our energy raging for 15 seconds and figuring out whose fault something is. And blaming is very corrosive in relationships, and it's one of the reasons we miss our opportunities for empathy. Because when something happens and we're hearing a story, we're not really listening. We're in the place where I was, making the connections as quickly as we can about whose fault something was.
Thank you. Now, questions. Yes, you had a question for me?
I had a comment.
A comment.
You know, in the last video, empathy, when the bear came down to the,
Yes.
to the lady, that was empathy. But yet, I was still left hanging, because you're still down there.
Uh-huh.
I would have said, let's go up.
Absolutely.
Be free. Sometimes you have to realize, don't stay there.
Absolutely. Take them to where you want them to go. Point well taken. So this brings us to the end of our formal presentations. Final questions and answers? Q&A? Yes, there's one hand here and one here. Ladies before gents, right? He says yes, ladies before gents.
Well, mine is kind of off subject as well.
That's okay. That's okay.
But you're the only person that I think may can answer this, because I've tried to ask other people about it.
No pressure.
It has a physical, spiritual, emotional, and mental appeal. That's why I want to ask you.
Okay.
When I was coming up, I was an abused child, and I often thought of suicide because I wanted to escape. But even though my family wasn't spiritual,
Uh-huh.
We never went to church. I knew I'd heard of Jesus and God, and I'd heard that if I committed suicide, I'd go to hell. Here recently, I've heard that that is not true, that the moment you decided to do that, you stepped out of your mental capacity and God would forgive you the minute you lost your mind and decided to take your life.
Okay.
What is your thought on that?
Okay.
And does this tie in with marijuana prevent somebody that's thinking of suicide?
Okay. Fair question. So did you guys hear that question? So like you, and first of all, thanks for sharing about your upbringing, right? Because as a child growing up, you really don't have a whole lot of choices. Like you don't get to choose your abuser, right? Whether it's emotional abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. In fact, 7 out of 10 girls will be sexually abused, and 4 out of 10 boys will be sexually abused. We don't get to choose our abusers. So that's one thing. And quite often we see depression, we see suicidal ideation because of the fact that you've been abused, some people for years and years and years for a long time. Right? And so I understand people's reaction to the abuse. It's a normal reaction to the abuse. It doesn't mean that it's the right reaction, but it does happen. Your question is, that person decides to commit suicide, will God forgive them? Here is my answer. My answer is, I don't know what God is going to do. God judges each person as an individual, right? You know, some people use the example of Samson, right? That Samson killed himself and Samson is going to be in heaven. Well, that's God's prerogative in terms of who is going to be in heaven and who is not going to be in heaven. So the honest answer is, I don't know. That is the honest answer is, I don't know. But here's my answer is that suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And try to say that again. Suicide is a permanent solution because once you do that, you are done, right? There's a permanent solution to the problem. I would advise that person to see if you can turn your pain into gain. You know how powerful it is, when someone can stand up and say, look at me, I have been abused. I have taken a punch and I have gotten up and I have gotten my life together. I believe you can get your life together. That person is in a better position than I am because I can't speak that person's language. So, exactly. And so that is my response, right? That is my response. I'm not saying don't be angry, don't be depressed, but see if you can take that pain and turn it into someone's gain and make that person's life better for it. Yes, to the back. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Sorry. No. Yeah, yes. Go for it.
To get back to the weed or marijuana question, I found this comment from the Spirit of Prophecy in the book Second Select Messages, page 288, paragraph 2. It says, Christ never planted the seeds of death in the system. Satan planted these seeds when he tempted Adam to eat of the tree of knowledge, which meant disobedience to God. Not one noxious plant was placed in the Lord's great garden, but after Adam and Eve sinned, poisonous herbs sprang up. In the parable of the sower, the question was asked the master, didst not thou sow good seed in thy field? From whence then had it tares? King James Version. The master answered, an enemy had done this, Matthew 13, 27, 28. All tares are sown by the evil one. Every noxious herb is of his sowing, and by his ingenious methods of amalgamation, he has corrupted the earth with tares. So how I understand is that after the man sinned
Mhm.
and was dispelled from the Garden of Eden, Satan had the ability and power, amalgamation to corrupt
Mhm.
what God has planted. Also, he has studied, that's another quote, the laboratories of nature,
Mhm.
and many evils or natural disasters that happen in the world are the results of the evil one.
Mhm.
All these, I believe, all the plants, the tobacco and marijuana, and all others that cocaine come from, he perverted. God has never created that, but that is a perversion. The man turned from grape juice into alcohol. That's just most everybody consume. So I found this because it just explains that he has perverted those, and not that God ever planted those poisonous plants to be in our system. It was perversion of Satan because the results of sin.
I'm glad you said that, and you quite rightly mentioned grapes, right? I love grapes, right? And I think grapes are good for you, right? However, like as you rightly said, man has taken the grape and turned it into wine, and the sugar and turned it into wine. That is disastrous to our bodies. So you're absolutely right. And as we move towards the end of time, more and more men are going to take things and turn them into destructive things. And that is one of the reasons why I wanted to give you a balanced perspective so that you get to come to your own conclusions. Did I answer your question about suicide? I'm glad I did. There's an answer to the back.
I just wanted to add to her, what she was asking. And you said that it is a permanent end to
A temporary
a
problem.
temporary problem and the end to their pain.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an end to their pain, but their pain continues because it's transferred to the family. So it's
Absolutely.
not really an end. It continues.
It's more of a continuation.
Continues and
So
continues.
you're
So
saying
the
it's
pain-
really not a good solution. It really is not a good solution. I see your hand here. Yes. We'll be wrapping up very shortly, Joan. Yes.
I hear more and more in the news. In fact, last week I heard about this, that synthetic
Mm-hmm.
cannabis is
Yes.
really coming up to the rise.
Yep.
So what is the difference between synthetic cannabis,
Uh-huh.
the THC
Mhm.
and CBD?
Good question. Very good question. So this is what the scientists are doing, right? You're going to like this one. Right. So they look at the plant. They look at the cannabis plant. I know I said there are two main species, right? Sativa and indica, right? So there are two species, and these two species have like a lot of children, over 500 different children, right? Different cannabinoids, right? That they're extracting, they're researching, they're experimenting, and like, we're gonna make something from this. They're researching, they're extracting, and they're making medications. So now, for instance, Marinol. So Marinol is one of those good examples. So now what they're doing now, instead of going to the plant, they're going into the lab, and they're duplicating the plant, and they're making it from substances, from synthetic substances, just like the plant. That's what they're doing right now. And using that for medications and for food products and for a lot of things. So it's like made in the lab, synthetic. So that's what they're doing.
Yeah, because they were saying that because it's so prevalent right now.
Correct.
They're finding that, and it's mostly your teenagers
Absolutely.
That are buying this synthetic
Absolutely.
cannabis, and they're getting very sick.
Absolutely.
throwing up, hallucinating, and so they were advising anyone that has taken this and they're going through these symptoms to immediately go to the hospital.
Yeah, so we have a couple they've moved away. Their daughter just committed suicide. So she was able to purchase synthetic stuff on the internet, and that's what she used to kill herself. And I know in Michigan, a couple of years ago, they had to ban the synthetic THC from gas stations because they were selling it in all of the gas stations. You can literally walk off the street, go to a gas station, and purchase it. And they were seeing a lot of people going to the emergency room because of using that synthetic substance. And they were seeing a spike in psychosis also because of the synthetic substance. And when you buy it off the internet, there's no telling what you're getting. There's no telling whatsoever. And so,
That's a big problem right now.
and so what some of the young people are doing, they're saying, okay, you don't want me to buy it off the internet, I'm going to go to a dispensary. Because in the dispensary now, it's controlled, right? They have to name the substance, what's in it. So their argument now is that I'm getting it from a safe place. Now, what's your problem?
But they're still going
Yeah.
underground
Oh,
on
yes.
the internet
But
because it's so easy.
right,
to
but
do.
the only point I'm making, that is true. But if we hold on to that, our young folk are going to come back and say, I'm going to a legal place now, I'm going to a dispensary. So now what's your problem with that? And we have to be prepared to answer that question also. Yes.
What she was saying, when the teenagers or the young people come in the hospital with the synthetic stuff, it's a safety hazard.
Oh,
It takes
absolutely.
about 20 people to hold them down.
Absolutely.
They come in crazy.
Because of the spike in psychosis, right? Yeah, because of the spike in psychosis. And it can lead to respiratory distress and death. Those are things that happen. Yes.
I have two granddaughters.
Two granddaughters.
That are both experiencing
Psychosis.
what's the other word? Schizophrenia.
Okay.
And they're both started using marijuana. And
How
they're getting
how
worse,
how old are they?
24 and
Mm.
21.
Yeah.
And they're still, but now they're experiencing more and more since they're doing this marijuana. So are you saying that the marijuana is making their schizophrenia worse?
Okay, so
This is regular, not
yeah.
chemical.
So let me say this. I don't know them, right? I don't know them. I don't know what they're using. I don't know where they're getting it from. I don't know what it's mixed with. So there's a lot of things that I don't know. But what I can tell you though, what the research is saying, THC, that's the one on the left-hand side. THC does not go very well with psychosis. It makes it worse. It's not a good solution. THC is not good for people with a disease of schizophrenia. It will make their conditions worse. Make no mistake about that. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I just want to say that I know we're talking about different substances for the brain, but since we're talking about the brain, I want to know. I had 2 years ago, I had a brain aneurysm.
Mm-hmm.
So, could you tell us how that if you could get it again, or
Okay. Okay. So what is what did they tell you is a brain aneurysm? How did they describe it to you?
they say it because from stress?
Right, but what happens when you have an aneurysm?
What happens when you have it?
Yes,
You pass out.
you pass out. So what happens is because see all of these red lines here, right? So 100 billion neurons and 1 trillion connections go on in your brain all the time. Amazing computer, right? There's some things that will affect this. Some of the things that can cause a rupture or a tear in your brain cells. Here are some of the things. You're not sleeping at night. You're not eating right. You're not exercising. If you're smoking, if you're drinking, high levels of stress, because stress promotes inflammation, which is swelling. So, stress is not good for the brain. And then we have genetics. Maybe it runs in your family, kind of like breast cancer, diabetes, or pancreatic cancer. Certain illnesses run in family. So once one of these bad boys is ruptured, right, then you are more susceptible to another one happening. It doesn't mean that it's going to happen. It doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it means that now you are more susceptible to it happening. So, what do you want to do? What do you want to do about it? You want to change your brain fast, like quick and in a hurry. What are some things that you can do to change your brain? You want to make sure that you're exercising on a regular basis. You know, this morning we spoke about bilateral stimulation, walking. If you can do that on a daily basis, what you're doing, you're increasing blood flow. That's what you're doing. And then look at what you're eating, right? If you're eating a lot of bread, rice, soft drinks, drinking soft drinks, and sugary stuff, right? You are promoting inflammation. You are inflaming the brain, setting you up for another aneurysm. So you have a choice in terms of how you want to change it. But thanks. So did I answer your question for you? Yes.
Okay, the question I had, and I like all the things I've heard. I like what you said there, Darko, about the fact that what was meant to be for our good has been turned into something, to harm us. The question I want to ask is, I know somebody who had a problem with smoking marijuana.
Yes.
Both him and his first wife.
Yes.
And as a result of that, a child was conceived, and the child has Down syndrome.
Mhm.
And that person blames themselves for the fact that they were addicted to marijuana.
Mhm.
Can that really cause a malformed
Okay.
fetus?
So let me answer your question by saying this. So I know a lot of people who don't smoke and they still have kids who are autism or Down syndrome. Right? I know a lot of people. So I don't want anyone to leave here saying that I said if you smoke weed, your child is going to have Down syndrome. I don't want to say that. But it puts you at risk, right? Which is why they're saying if you really want to smoke weed, wait until you're at least age 24. Because you know why, right? Because the brain reaches its maximum development at about age 24, right? That's when the brain reaches its maximum development. So if someone is smoking when the child is still in vitro, the child is smoking also, right? Or if someone is drinking, like for instance, fetal alcohol syndrome, you have a mom who's pregnant and the mom is drinking alcohol, you put in the baby at risk for fetal alcohol syndrome. So there is a correlation between using substances and damaging the fetus.
Dr. King,
Yes,
you cover a lot of information on suicidal,
yes,
depression, addiction, and so on.
yes,
A lot of these problems start from children
yes,
who have untreated anxiety.
yes.
What are your advice for parents?
Okay. Good, good. Is that the last question of the day, Dawn? That's the last question? Yes. So, anxiety stems from a lot of things, right? It could be a chemical imbalance in the brain. It's one thing, right? You have parents who, because of abuse, we spoke about abuse, neglect. The dad leaves today, and dad does not come back for the next 2 months, and then he comes in and out of the person's life, right? So that person develops, for instance, in this case of separation anxiety. You have no idea when your mom is going to come home. You have no idea when your dad is going to come home. You have no idea what mood your mom or dad will be in. Like for my personal father, my father had anger management problem, and in our culture, what the men did is that their way of dealing with everything in the house, right, was licks. Right? I don't know if any one of you got spanking when maybe I'm the only person here because everyone is looking at me like, okay, that explains why you're so crazy, right? So, that was their solution, right? You couldn't get your homework right. What was the solution? Licks. You have ADHD, I'm going to beat it out of you, right? You have depression, I'm going to beat it out of you. You have anxiety, I'm going to beat it out of you. That was their solution. So just that attitude alone can make the children very anxious. And so, what is the solution for that? It calls for a lot of education, right? Education for the child, counseling, right? And education for the parents. And I know a number of Caribbean parents, you mention to them counseling, and they look at you as if you're crazy because they don't want to go. But Don, those are the best solutions I can tell you. And in some cases, if it's very bad, the person may have to have small doses of anti-anxiety medications because counseling does not heal everything. If you have a chemical imbalance, you're going to need to have medication management to correct the chemical imbalance. That's the best answer I can give you. I think that was the last question, right? On your part. Yes.
Okay, Dr. King, I have a question regarding church, and I don't want anybody to take offense to this.
Okay.
A lot of children are abused in childhood
Mm-hmm.
in our churches by church leaders,
Okay.
and that has led them to have, a lot of them have scars. I have a sister who talks about some abuse by a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
And so, this becomes offensive to us as church folks when, people who have experiences or adverse childhood experiences
Mm-hmm.
that actually, turns them away from church.
Correct.
What are some of the things that we can do to avoid adverse childhood experiences in our churches?
Well, one of the things we're doing right now, Joan, is that we're talking about it, right?
Good.
We are bringing it to the surface. Because let me give you some shocking news, right? The more religious you are, the more likely you are to engage in abuse, and the more likely you are to try to keep it hushed. You want me to say more about it? I can explain it from a brain perspective. It makes perfect sense, right? In our brain, we have a pleasure center, right? When you eat a nice piece of, I'm not saying that you should do this, but if you eat a nice piece of apple pie, you feel good, right? I see people laughing, right? You can identify with me. For some, it is ice cream, right? Chocolate, or whatever it is. You feel good, right? And if you had a chance to look at someone's emotional brain center, if you were to hook them up to a machine and watch them eat ice cream or chocolate or candy, it's amazing how their pleasure center lights up, right? So the more you experience pleasure is the more you want to experience more pleasure. That's why the Bible talks about self-control, right? That's why the devil takes advantage of that same pleasure center. We only have one pleasure center, right? And so you mentioned ministers, right? Unfortunately, or fortunately, most ministers are male, most priests are male. They're seen as the authority figure in the church, right? And there's a sense of attraction when it comes to power. And unfortunately, what draws us to the ministry is the same thing that draws us to sin, the pleasure center. Because it feels good when you do deeply religious stuff. It really feels good. It also feels good when you engage in sexual activities. So the stronger that thing is the same pleasure center that is at play, right? So that's one issue. The second issue is, and I'm just going to say, is that in our church, if you have a church that emphasizes strict rules and secrecy, then you're likely to hide abuse. Look at the Catholic Church, right? Thousands and hundreds of thousands of children are abused on a regular basis by priests. Do you see any one of them going to jail or prison? No. You know why? Because there's this high degree of control and secrecy. So that's what's masking it. So what we can do for our church is bring this information to the surface and let our young people know, no, this is not okay. No, it is not okay. I understand people make mistakes and so on and so forth, but this is not okay. And we need to provide them the information. And we need to provide them with what I call refusal skills. Skills that say no, 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 no. And tell someone about it. Tell someone about it. Bring it to the surface. That's my best advice.
Thank you.
All right. I think that was the final question. I want to thank you for having me back. I hope you have some great takeaways so that when you have conversations with other people and when you have conversations with young people, when they fact check you and they bring stuff on the internet and they bring it to you, you will be educated to say, wait a minute now, wait a minute, here's the reason why that is so. So guys, thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah.